Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala barakatuhu. Hello viewers, thank you for watching BayMuslim Media Live. Thank you for joining for a very informative program today. I'm sure many of you heard about what's happening in Sri Lanka. Brothers and sisters, our brothers and sisters in Sri Lanka, they are going through the tremendous stress. There are many things happening around the world, particularly about COVID-19. People are losing their loved ones, but in Sri Lanka, the challenges are more. Though after they are losing their loved ones, and the challenges are how they are actually uh, doing the final ritual. There are a lot of challenges are happening right now, and we are going to deep dive into the problem. We are honored to have our guest today. I'm going to introduce with all your help. Please join me to welcome Brother Hilmy Ahmed. Brother Hilmy Ahmed, thank you for joining. Can you hear me?
Welcome.
All right,
Yeah,
thank you
you're
for.
welcome.
Yeah. So it was indeed an honor and pleasure to have you here. Brother Hilmi, he is from Sri Lanka. He is joining from Sri Lanka. Brother Hilmi is the chairman and chief executive officer of Young Asia Television. Young Asia Television is a socially conscious media organization that works in close cooperation with a number of television networks in Asia, Africa, and Latin America on issues related to human rights, peace, the environment and culture, sustainable development, and other socio-economic concerns. He was serving as an executive committee officer in Global Knowledge Partnership, dedicated much of his time basically and expertise to revolutionizing concept of public service broadcasting, driving the Young Asia Television socially conscious media campaigns. Currently, is also serving as a vice president of the Muslim Council of Sri Lanka. Brother Hilmi, thank you for joining again one more time. Indeed, it's an honor and pleasure to have you with us here. I know it's early morning for you. I'm very sorry about that, having you here in the very early morning, your time. All right. So Sri Lanka, it's one of the beautiful uh, uh, island country which is in Asia. Right. So it's a beautiful country and beautiful people, and there are 20 plus million people are there living there, and out of that 10% of the Muslim population is also there. It's a very multi race country. The majority of them they are Buddhist, and a good number of Hindus and Christians and Muslims. So this country, three to for 4 decades of the time, they spent time on uh, basically the civil war inside the country. But after all happened, it came to end in 2009. Since then, they are making progress, and the challenges that they are facing, especially Muslims, that is what we are going to talk about today. Right. So the question that we have here for Brother Hilmi, inshallah, we'll get started. Brother Hilmi, if you could just explain and briefly tell us about the history of Muslims in Sri Lanka for our audience.
Peace be upon you and all our viewers, and a Merry Christmas to all my Christian brothers and sisters. It is indeed a pleasure to be with you today. Let me briefly explain. Muslims have been living in Sri Lanka for over 1,200 years. We have coexisted with all communities, and Muslims have contributed much to the progress of the country. And since of late, of course, unfortunately, there has been some kind of racism that has been building, and it has culminated in today's context where even our janazas are not allowed to be buried. Janazas who die of COVID 19 are not allowed to be buried as the religion and culture demands.
Yeah, brother Hilmi. So, but you mentioned that the communities they coexisted, right? So, how was the relationship since the beginning? The relationship between Buddhist community and the Muslims versus Christians and Hindus.
Basically, the Muslims were migrants from Morocco and other places. There were sailors who came into the country, and there's a large number of Muslims who have migrated from India. All of them, all of them have basically been coexisting with the ancient kings, and the Muslims were basically a trusted people and even served in the court of the ancient kings. And but uh, within the last decade or so, or three decades, the tensions have been rising. But as you mentioned, Sri Lanka went through an ethnic conflict and a civil war for over 30 years. During this period, Muslims uh, did not face any racial problems because the main concentration of the Sinhala Buddhists was against the Tamil community. But in 2009, with the war victory, I guess some racists thought that we have finished off one minority, that is the Tamil people, and probably wanted to finish off the Muslims. So the racism and Buddhist extremism started somewhere around 2009 and continues up to now. So we cannot understand that people with whom we lived so peacefully suddenly turning their guns on us. And we have tried to engage them. And unfortunately, the 21st of April suicide bombing, which killed 259 Christian people
Right.
in churches and in tourist hotels, has brought in a major scar in our
Right.
relationship. And yes, go ahead, please. What question?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, and you see, I mean, the so-called Muslims or the Muslims who uh, were Muslims by name, I would say, were totally rejected by the Muslim community. We insisted that they should not be even given an Islamic funeral
Mm,
because Islam forbids killing of innocent people.
right.
And anybody undertaking such massive destruction does not deserve to get Islamic funeral. So none of the suicide bombers got even an Islamic funeral.
Mm. Yeah, we will definitely talk about that. So, but before that, I want to talk about the Muslims and then the contribution to the economy. No, we
Uh,
heard and we are reading a lot about Muslims are doing good and they are contributed a lot to that economy, right? So, from your perspective, how the community, the Sri Lankan Muslim community, is contributing to the economy of this country.
Uh, Muslims came into Sri Lanka as traders and have continued to be in trading for many, many years. And but you see, it is a myth to say that the Muslims are rich. The majority of the Muslims are very poor, and if you take the city of Colombo, the majority of the slum dwellers or the poorest of the poor are from the Muslim community. So while there is a lot of affluence among some of the Muslims who are into business and trading, there is a majority, right, who are almost on the poverty line. But the last 3 decades, Muslims also have put in a lot of emphasis on
Mm,
education. Education and many Muslims, especially with the liberalization of the economy, Sri Lankan economy in 1977, lots of Muslims went abroad to study in some of the best universities. And also, if you take the IT field, Muslims have taken to it like a fish in water, right? They have done very well globally,
mm,
and so there is a mixed uh, occupation for Muslims today. They are some of the top professionals in the country, and if you take the medical field, we have some of the best doctors, and we have some of the best lawyers. We have excellent professionals in almost every field. But the Muslim community as such is not very rich as some people presume to be.
mm. So, but talking about the Muslim contribution to the Sri Lankan economy, right? How about in politics and in the government jobs? Are Muslims in the government job and in scattered across the nation, and also mainly the involvement in politics, civic
Yeah.
engagement.
Yeah, I think we have more or less a proportional representation in Parliament because of the uh, preferential voting system that has been introduced in the country in 77. So we have had between 18 to 23 parliamentarians since 1981. If you take the our contribution in the public sector, I would say it's minimal. One thing is, of course, the government itself does not permit many Muslims to rise up there because, you see, I mean, there has been some kind of a prejudice against the Muslims. But on the other hand, Muslims also are a community that is very keen to make quick money. So getting into professions like professions in government service has not been very attractive to them.
Mm,
Whereas the Buddhist community, they crave to be in public service because they get a pension at the end of their retirement, and their comforts are there. And Muslims are a little more enterprising than the Sinhala Buddhists, I would say. So they want more challenges than a very routine job.
all right. So the other question that I have, you have been there, and in fact, you born and brought up over there, right? So, but growing up as a Muslim, um, comparing those days with now. So, what is the difference that you see? The color changed, the people changed, and the challenges has gone up for the Muslims, right? But when you look back, maybe 30, 40 years back, comparing with your world and when you were a kid, right? So that Sri Lanka and comparing with the current Sri Lanka. So in terms of people and in terms of their attitude, behavior towards a Muslim.
Uh, I studied in a church missionary school, one of the best in the country, and I had my classmates of all ethnicities, and including a few foreigners, right, who were studying there. We never felt that the person seated next to me or in the class or was of a different ethnicity, because ethnicity and religion did not play any role in the classroom.
Hmm.
Yeah, we were all brothers, friends, and we lived together. I can recall that as a child, my friends would visit my home or I would visit their homes, and we would rush straight to the kitchen, right, and call everybody's parents, uh, daddy or mommy, and we will go and serve ourselves from the kitchen itself and eat together, right. One thing I must say is that whenever we visited non-Muslims, they will make sure that nothing in that house is uh, not, I mean, haram for us.
Mm.
They would ensure that they would give us halal food,
Wow, wow.
and that was an unwritten understanding.
Mm.
Nobody asked for it. Nobody insisted on it. So it is very strange that while growing up, uh, we lost most of it. Right? For example, I have two sons. They went to a very reputed school in Colombo, and most of their friends
Mm.
were non-Muslims. Most of them are non-Muslims, and we have inculcated in them to respect the others, but also they practice their religion. Even when they go to their friends, when it comes to prayer time, they will ask the parents whether they could pray in a corner of the room,
Mm.
and they gladly accepted and were very happy. So many parents have called us and told us that how wonderful it is to see your young children practicing religion even in our home. Right?
Wow.
We are so happy to hear that. But that is among a small group of people. On an average, if a Sri Lankan Muslim went and tried to pray in another thing, they would be looked at with some kind of, I would say, distrust. Right? What are these people coming and praying inside our house? But I was fortunate to have friends of my children who didn't have any of this kind of racism, right? But majority of the children are not blessed with it. But that is also because we as Muslims are also to be blamed. We have segregated ourselves from the Sri Lankan community
Mm.
to a large extent, right? We have segregated ourselves in Muslim schools or international schools where only Muslims go. So, I mean, none of these children have any friends, right, who are from other communities. And I would say there are probably uh, lots of children, especially among the girls, who would never have had a non-Muslim friend, which is a huge liability, right, on our community, because there is no understanding of other people, their religion, and their culture. So everything is alien to us, and everything we do is alien to them. So, I mean, there is a need to go back, look inwards, and go back to our roots. Islam is a religion of peace, and Islam does not encourage divisions based on religion, caste, or creed. So I think there is a social responsibility on our scholars and our parents to inculcate better values amongst our children.
Yeah, very rightly said that we as a community, it's a high time for us to reach out, as much as we could to engage with them, to remove some kind of misunderstandings and that they see. The media is there. Islamophobia is everywhere. They are spreading across with all kind of media, right? So people are just keep watching the things that they are seeing. They come up with their own conclusion on this is how the Muslims are. Right, very rightly said that. We will discuss further on that. So now the main reason that we are discussing with you on what has been happening for last several months, and the whole world is devastated after hitting with the Corona 19. All right, COVID-19. It started somewhere and then it ended up coming to each and every neighborhood, and for and people are dying right and left. We could see that. Right, so this is the challenge across the board, right? But what's happening in Sri Lanka, it is no other Muslim ummah ever experienced it, right? So, but if you could explain to us, what happened, and but very first incident, but somebody would have died, very first case due to COVID-19, right? And when did you come to know about the rituals, the basic human rights, they denied, and the Muslims are not allowed to bury, right? So what was that moment, and how did you feel at that time?
You see, our Quarantine Act is well over 100 years old, and it clearly defines disposal of bodies, uh, due to any infectious disease. And it is very clearly stated that burial or cremation is an option for disposal of the bodies. And on the 27th of March,
Mm,
the government released a standard operating procedure, SOP as it's called, and said that both cremation and burial are allowed in the case of COVID-19 infected deaths.
right.
And on 30th, there was a Muslim janaza, and the judicial medical officer insisted that that janaza has to be cremated
Mm,
because it could contaminate groundwater sources. And then again, the government revised that circular or the SOP on the 7th of April to say burial is not allowed and only cremation is the preferred form of disposal of the body, which is totally unjustified. As 194 countries as of today
right.
are burying their dead, and the WHO, the ICRC, and so many international agencies have clearly said that there is no threat by burying a COVID infected person. So this is very strange for us. Sri Lanka and China are the only countries in the world which is cremating uh, all the COVID infected deaths. And we have been trying to engage with the government since the new SOP was released and explained to them. And the government set up a technical committee to review this. But unfortunately, the technical committee does not include virologists, microbiologists, epidemiologists, anybody. It is headed by people who do not understand the sciences behind virus and what it can do, uh, and how long it can live, how it is spread. So it's very strange that it is like asking an eye surgeon to do a heart transplant, basically, right? So I mean, we don't know why the government doesn't want to listen to the WHO and listen to or at least look at the practices of over 194 countries, because Sri Lanka has nothing that other countries do not have. Our close neighbor India is burying. Singapore is burying, Hong Kong is burying, right? And as you know, in the US, there are mass graves, right, which they're using. In Italy, they do the same, and in many other countries. So it is very strange. Yesterday, a geologist who is actually a very racist lady who is spearheading uh, this campaign went to the extent of saying in Denmark, 17 million minks were culled and buried in very shallow graves.
Mm,
And when these 17 million minks were decomposing, it let out gases, and it was close to a very close water reservoir that they buried it. So they claim that it would contaminate the water reservoir. Obviously, there is a big difference between 17 million and one body. And we have one of the world's most respected scientists, Professor Malik Piris, who lives in Hong Kong, and he is the one who found the SARS virus. Right? He has gone on record saying that there's absolutely no chance of any contamination of groundwater sources by the burial. And the government's own chief epidemiologist also has gone on record saying that the viruses cannot be spread through groundwater, right? So once the virus basically doesn't survive for too long in in a dead body, and all even cremations are undertaken uh, in sealed body bags. So I mean, there's no chance for this thing for even years for anything from that body to come out because plastic doesn't decompose easily.
Right. Mm, the question that we have here, right? So, what was the scientific reason the government is giving when this kind of things, came to us, right, as an order, GO, government order, right? So, I'm sure the community would have devastated, and they would have, had a lot of protests, and especially the youngsters, and they can't take it. This is very sensitive for Muslims, right? When as a community reached out to the government, so what was their reaction and what was the reason was given?
You see, the president has been approached many times
Mm,
by various people, including civil society, political leadership, our corporate sector, the business people, and our scholars. Every time we reached out to him, he said, I'm not going to make a decision on this. This has to be decided by the health authorities. And the health authorities had appointed a technical committee of the most unsuitable people to do this job. And there is a geologist who is actually been nominated for a award at UNESCO, which is sponsored by Kuwait, right?
mm,
And she's of course a geologist, and has absolutely no knowledge about viruses. So she is the one, right, who, when I filed a fundamental rights case in the Supreme Court of Sri Lanka against cremation, she is the one who came in as an intervening petitioner and claimed that the virus, if the bodies if buried, right, could contaminate groundwater, right? Whereas when the scientists, right, who know about viruses are clearly saying that there is no way a virus can contaminate groundwater if buried, if COVID infected bodies are buried. So it's very, very strange that the government doesn't want to listen to professionals in Sri Lanka, right, who are all saying that there's absolutely no truth in the fact that it can contaminate water, or even the global scientists. Right? I mean, mind you, 194 countries are doing it. What is so unique about Sri Lanka? So it is. There is a lot more to this than science. So it is purely mm, uh, based on I would say racism, right? The Muslims of Sri Lanka uh, in the November 2018 did not vote for the incumbent president,
mm,
and this and he claims that he was elected by the Sinhala Buddhists and that they are trying to bring in a law for the country saying one law, one country,
mm,
right? Whereas today, right, the minorities, including the Tamils, Muslims, and uh,
Christians.
some of the Sinhalese
Mm,
in the Candian area, it's called the upcountry Sinhalese, also have their own personal laws. This is nothing to do with the general law or criminal law or anything of that nature. Our personal laws, right, only deal with our inheritance, that is between Muslims only, and then marriages and divorces, right? So, I mean, it doesn't affect any other community, right? This is purely for us to follow our religious practices and religious requirements, right? We have certain conditions of marriage, we have certain conditions for uh, divorce, right? So I mean that cannot be compromised by any Muslim,
right.
right? So basically, I mean, I can't understand what this whole thing is about, where they claim one country, one law, right, which has to deal with personal issues, personal requirements for marriage, divorce, or inheritance of
Mm,
people.
yeah.
And I also want to add that our biggest concern today is radicalization of the youth. And,
Exactly.
you know, it will be very, very difficult, even for me, to accept cremation of somebody close to me.
Right.
But I mean, our biggest worry is how would the youth take this, right? And we have mobilized our scholars, we have our Jummah prayers and sermons, right? And all forms of communication among the Muslims is based on asking them to be tolerant, do not try to take the law into their own hands, that there are people working and engaging the government to resolve this. So, I mean, nobody should break the law
That's right.
under any circumstance. So our religious leaders are playing a major part in this. Our social communication is fully along those lines, and unfortunately, the Jummah uh, sermons are limited to certain numbers, so it doesn't reach as much as possible. But one good thing about Sri Lanka is that our Jummah sermon is broadcast live on radio. So it reaches every single home,
Right.
Muslim home. So, I mean, the Muslims are doing all that is possible to address any form of radicalization. This thing, but I fear that the tolerance levels of Muslims uh, may be compromised if this goes on. Because if somebody close to you is cremated, uh,
It is.
that cannot be erased from your minds
That's true.
forever.
That is true. Yeah. Yeah, but if you see it, it started back in March, and then we are in almost in December time frame, right? It's been it's been nine months, right? Almost, right? And we are hearing, and then we are also reading it. So there are large number of Muslims are dying due to COVID-19, comparing with other communities. Is that true, or what's going on there?
Yeah, it is. We have almost 170 deaths in the country due to COVID-19, and more than 110 of them are Muslims.
Oh,
There could be different explanations to this. One thing is, as I said before, the Muslims uh, are living in basically slums of Colombo, and there is no social interaction. Their houses are probably 8 by 10 feet, right? It's a very narrow strip. The family itself cannot even sleep at the same time. So they take turns. Some people sleep in the night, some people sleep during the day, right? So I mean, their living conditions are so poor, and they have to uh, live in uh, most of the time in open space.
Okay.
Houses are joining each other in the slums, and most of them are on the streets or outside their homes, seated on verandas, and while being there, of course, there is close interaction between peoples, and so the virus can easily spread among this community. So that is probably one reason why we have large number of deaths amongst Muslims. But also there is also uh, fear among Muslims
Mm.
to go and seek medical attention because they fear that if they die, uh, they would be cremated if they are found to be corona infected. So unfortunately, this could also be a reason why there are more Muslims dying than anybody else.
Mm. Interesting. But is it also true that only in certain cities like Colombo has more number of deaths comparing with the other states because of the slum, or anything else is going on?
Well, I mean, as I said, Colombo has the majority deaths,
Mm.
and that is mainly because of the living conditions of the Muslims who are extremely poor, and most of them are daily wage earners. So, since the corona infection in March this year, most of them have been unemployed because they are not able to go and make their daily living. Most of them are people who are porters in the city or driving three wheelers or taxis or even laborers. So there is no employment for them. So they are mostly at home and getting infected. But also, as I said, people may not be seeking medical attention from government facilities who are well equipped to deal with this because fearing that they will be cremated if they die of corona.
Mm. So the interfaith is always play a big role, especially when communities are going through difficulties, right? The interfaith, in the sense, people from the leaders from the other faith communities, they come together, and if there are any difficulties, they work together, and then they will also help each other and stand with each other during these difficulties times, right? But how is the interfaith community leaders are reacting to this, and how well they are standing with the Muslim community to just get their rights to be delivered for them, especially with the last ritual of any human being.
Sri Lanka traditionally has had hundreds of interfaith groups intervening, especially during the 30-year war we had. But unfortunately, uh, for valid reasons or otherwise, uh, people are very scared today, right? Especially after this government came into power, that they may be targeted by the government if they spoke out. So there has been very little uh, civil society uh, or even interfaith groups coming out and speaking out in support of us. But a 20-day-old baby was cremated about 3 weeks ago.
Right.
A 20-day year-old baby. Nobody cremates babies, not even the singular Buddhists. But this child was cremated, and that has woken up
Right.
quite a lot of the non-Muslims or people of other faiths, and there has been some uh, visible signs that they are responding to this. Right? We had a white ribbon campaign that was tied on the gates of the cemeteries, and people are beginning to speak out. And I think there is a little bit of awareness being created amongst the people of other faiths.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, as you said, right? Even though this program is this issue, the challenges are the Sri Lankan Muslims have been facing since March. It did not come to no, even though there were a lot of news here and there. There were no big protest ever conducted and anywhere. But right after this 20 days baby was cremated, right, this is where actually they went to the next level. There were protests have happened last week, I think yesterday, in New York and other part of the world, Europe, and other places, right? But do you think our community could have acted even faster, instead of just waiting for this moment to happen, and they could have actually bring it to the attention by just protesting and by other means to the international audience.
You see, I think awareness is being created in world capitals by a small group of the Muslim diaspora.
Mm,
Muslims are a very small diaspora group in any country. And so I think it's beginning to get world attention. But I must tell you that I have been an activist all my life. And I have never seen uh, the kind of reluctance we see from the international community, the, the people of other faiths, and I can also empathize or understand uh, with them because they fear this government very much because there has been quite a bit of militarization of every aspect of civilian life during the recent months or the last year. So people are intimidated into silence. Even the international community, even the Western embassies in Colombo, who would have come out very strongly against violation of basic human rights, are very silent. I have written to the WHO, Sri Lanka, and asked them for a direction on the burial issue because you see, I had filed a fundamental rights case, and I wanted to submit the WHO version. To this day, right? It's almost 8 months. I have not got a response from the WHO, and you see, when we filed, 9 others filed separate fundamental rights case in the Supreme Court. All our cases were taken up together. And the Supreme Court, after 1.5 days of hearing and postponing it for over 4 months, right? After 1.5 days of hearing, said that they are rejecting the leave to proceed. So the case was basically dropped. With, of course, they don't have to give any valid reason for that. They said it is a majority decision of a three-bench judge, and nobody can question that,
mm,
right? Because the Supreme Court is the highest, and you cannot question that. But it is very unfortunate that they don't want to even hear the case, right? They don't want to listen to our this thing. We have given written submissions. We have given all the necessary documentation, including uh, affidavits from experts, right, from Sri Lanka and abroad, right, which proves beyond any reasonable doubt that there is absolutely no threat, right, in burying COVID-infected bodies.
All right, so brothers and sisters, those who are watching, we are talking with Brother Hilmy Ahmed, who is the Vice President of Islamic Council from Sri Lanka, and I'm going to have one of the guests and a community leader, my dear respected brother. Um, he does not need any introduction. Salah Al Bakri. He is our founder of Support Life Foundation. He's an activist, and thank you for joining with us, Salah Al Bakri. So we are talking. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I'm sure you would have heard the whole conversation that we had with Brother Hilmi. All right. So, but just if you have any questions, and go ahead. I have a couple of more questions. Go ahead, Brother Salah.
Yeah, indeed, I have actually quite a few questions. Jazakumullah khair, Brother Hilmi, for the time. Brother Hilmi, may I ask you a very short question? Where do you live?
Pardon?
Where do you live?
I didn't hear you properly.
No, no. Where do you live? He's asking where do you live?
I live in Colombo. I live in Colombo, but I am from the central part of Sri Lanka. But during the last 40 years, I've been living in Colombo.
Yes, good. So I just don't know how free you are to express yourself, and that's why I asked that question. Can you hear me well, Brother Hilmi?
Yes, I can.
Yeah. So as a foreigner to Sri Lanka, as somebody who wants to learn more, can you just elaborate one more time? So we have multi ethnicities. I know we have the Muslims, we have the Catholics, we have the Hindu. Do we have also Buddhists there?
Yes.
Can you tell me
Yeah.
what percentage?
Yeah. Actually, Sri Lanka is a Buddhist country where 74% of the population are Buddhists, and there is about 10% Muslims and about 16% Hindus, and there are the rest are of other faiths. And Sri Lanka is a multi-ethnic, multicultural country which has a proud tradition of living in harmony uh, until the 1980s, when war broke out between the Tamils of the northern province and Sri Lanka, and the Tamils were demanding that they were not being given their rights, so they needed to have a separate state of their own. And that war dragged on for 30 years, billions and billions of dollars lost. And it is estimated that over 300,000 people died in that war. So it's a huge cost to the country, and the destruction to the economy is unimaginable, because Sri Lanka has a very strong literacy rate, now reaching almost 97%, right, compared to other countries in the region which are very, very low. So, and also the education uh, in Sri Lanka has been of very high standard, and people have taken up to various professions globally. Right? They were much respected professionals in every country they serve. But unfortunately, because of the deterioration that has been caused because of the first ethnic conflict, and now the targeting of Muslims, the best professionals and the businessmen are leaving the country, migrating to other countries, which is a very sad state of affairs. Because we are in Sri Lanka, we are born in Sri Lanka, we want to die in Sri Lanka, we want to be buried in Sri Lanka, and we want to serve the country as long as we live. Right? I mean, most of us have the option of migrating to other countries. But we don't want to do it, right? Because we love this country, right? This is our home, and there is no way that we are not going to give up that right.
Right. Just one question before you continue. Brothers and sisters, those who are watching, if you have any questions, specific questions to Brother Hilmy, please put it here in the comments section so that I can display it. I'm sure we will have some time to take a few questions from audience. All right. So go ahead, Brother
Yeah.
Sal.
So when you stir racial tensions in any country in the world, and we've seen it in many countries in the world, and we'll continue to see it, and our kids more likely will continue to see racial tensions, right? Ethnic tensions. It's usually that there is somebody who's at the back who's benefiting from this. If I were to ask you who would be of benefit to this, so that's number one. Number two is just a comment about what I see in many parts of the world, the Muslim world specifically, is that when there are minorities, that Muslim minorities who are violated, like we saw recently in Myanmar, to an incredible extent, there wasn't real consequences, which makes it very encouraging. Keep in mind, Myanmar was also a Buddhist-run country and still is. Your country, 70%, according to you, is Buddhist. So I wonder about the correlation here. Is it that, oh, we can intimidate the Muslims, we can walk all over them and nothing will happen? Because that's the history of the region. 300 years ago, the Chinese invaded Vietnam, which was mostly under the Champa rule, Vietnam and Cambodia as one large kingdom, and nothing happened. And before you know it, till today, the Champa people are very discriminated against, and we went into under the knife in the 70s and 80s in Vietnam, in Cambodia, in Laos, and that is the history of minorities. So between us being easy target, and it looks like a target that you can target for political gains, and benefit from, and 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 suffer no consequences. And between the question that comes in my mind, and I assume anybody's mind, what's making it? Who's triggering these tensions in the last few months, or what have you? Given that, as you said, and you keep on elaborating, as a proud Sri Lankan, and you can feel the pride in your voice when you talk about your country, and I love that. As a proud Sri Lankan, who's benefiting at the end of the day from these tensions? And I'll stop here.
Uh, you see, I must go back to history of where all this started. You see, we were colonized by the Portuguese, Dutch, and the British. And during the British period, they of course had this divide and rule policy where they put communities against each other. The singular majority, they were basically farmers, and they were not given any prominence in government or any professional areas. The Tamil community or the Hindu community were given a lot of space in administration. They were the lead civil servants of the country. The Muslims who excelled in trading got the commercial side of our history. Right, they were the main suppliers to the British Army, and trading was their forte. So these were basically divided amongst based on forced on by the British rulers. But since independence, justifiably so, the Sinhalese or the Sinhala Buddhists were encroaching into areas where the minority communities dominated. They had all the right to be there. They had they should get their share of all this. And also education. You see, the missionary schools were established in mostly minority areas. And so, for that reason, many of the minorities, especially the Tamil community, got very good education. Muslims were traders and they didn't concentrate much on education, but they were very successful in trading. So, when with independence, the country started moving towards a more democratic governance, and so the Sinhala Buddhists got more entrances to universities, their education levels started increasing, thereby they got into professions that were basically justified, and slowly, there was a pressure on the minorities to provide that space. And so that has been going on. But since the end of the ethnic war in 2009, uh, I would say up to the time they defeated the Tamil Tigers, as they are called, uh, the Sinhalese were a very scared community, I would say. They didn't want this thing. They would have even agreed to division of the country if, say, around 2005, 2006, right? Because they were intimidated because the Tigers, as you know, uh, were the inventors of the suicide bombing, and they caused so much mayhem within the city of Colombo and in Buddhist areas that nobody uh, actually thought that the war could be won. So when the ethnic war was won, or the Tamil Tigers were uh, destroyed, the euphoria of that war victory forced the Sinhala Buddhists to look at the next minority who were presumed to be very affluent. Uh, so they just wanted to destroy the Muslim economy. So there it started and it went on. You see, I must tell you that part of that blame should come to us, because Muslims who do not spend their money on other vices like alcohol or gambling or any other vices, right, live better, right, compared to the same level of income other people have. We dress better, we have much better houses, we have uh, much better vehicles, and so on. But that is only amongst a fraction of the community. But the visibility is so high, right? If we have weddings, we will have 1,000 guests or 2,000 guests, and I mean, and when they see our ladies walking into those weddings with uh, tons of gold right wrapped around them, it intimidates them, it makes them jealous, it makes them angry. Right? They feel that the Muslims are exploiting the majority to gain this kind of wealth. But that wealth is not even amongst 0.5% of the Muslim community. The rest are living very average lives, most of them living below the poverty line.
I see. I see. So, from us, unless Nilam, you want to ask something?
Yeah, I have a question regarding the COVID-19. I wanted to go back, and lately we are also hearing there are dead bodies, the Muslim janazas actually being cremated without even COVID-19 proof. You know, But so this makes people to think that maybe they have a separate, a different target to, the racists. They are coming after Muslims. Maybe they wanted to take a revenge. Something going on here. So if you could elaborate a little bit on that.
Yeah. There have been many instances where the PCR reports have not been uh, shown to the families, right? Not only shown to the families, even the bodies
May
are
not
not
be.
shown to the families. So this causes a huge suspicion among the Muslims. There was one instance where a body was cremated, and later the PCR report came out saying that it's COVID negative. Right? So all these things are causing huge trauma amongst the Muslim community, and the fact that most of them are not allowed to see the bodies, right, is very traumatic on one side, but it also causes huge suspicion amongst the Muslims whether the person whom they cremate is actually their own loved ones or even a doll, right? And since of late, I've been hearing rumors whether there could be any kind of organ trading
Mm,
happening on Muslim deaths. So, I mean, I doubt very much because Sri Lankan medical professionals are beyond that, in my opinion.
mm,
But there is suspicion among Muslim circles that this could be a possibility. So it's very, very difficult. But about a month back, the Sri Lankan community decided not to give coffins, not to sign the consent form for cremation, and most of them said, "Do whatever you want with the body."
mm.
Right? Because it's forbidden in Islam, it's haram for us to be part of anything to do with cremation.
That's right.
So unfortunately, uh, some were cremated, but later we were actually since March we have had continuous engagement with the government, and now actually we Muslims are providing the government with reefer containers where the bodies could be stored in cold storage, right, until resolution is uh, resolution comes to the burial demands. We have, fortunately, about 7 or 8 bodies now in Colombo that has been preserved. But in the outstation, they are not willing to address that. This is with government approval. The Director General of Health Services wrote to our Justice Minister, who is a Muslim, asking the Muslim community to provide these reefer containers. So immediately, within 2 days, right, the reefer containers were supplied. But it has not reached out to the provinces. So in Colombo, so far, 8 bodies are in this reefer container, and but in the outstations they are still cremating.
Mm. Yeah, but I have one more question. Otherwise, now after that, I will let Sheikh Salah to actually ask the couple of things that I have here. The targeted racism against Muslims for last almost a decade, right? And then the recent attack on the Muslims, right? So were they really targeted with some intention behind, and from your perspective, right? So how do you see that?
Uh, I assume this is the target is to basically destroy the Muslim economy. Right? There is a lot of assumption that Muslims are rich and affluent. So I think the whole racism uh, starts there,
Mm,
and for them, the Muslims who are driving around in flashy cars having huge weddings, having beautiful houses is an ISO for most of them. You see, the average Sinhalese person, as I said, right, is not enterprising, right? He's very comfortable having a secure government job, which does not pay very
Much. Right.
pay well at all, pay
Right.
well at all, right? But they are more interested in their pensions and security of the job. But whereas Muslims are daring, right? They take bold business decisions and also enjoy the benefits of the windfall,
Right.
right? But that is only among a fraction of the Muslim community, right? But they are the most visible, right? If you go to Jummah prayer, you will see the best cars in Sri Lanka parked outside mosques, all the luxury vehicles, right? And the unfortunate thing is when every person tries to take his own vehicle to the masjid. So there is huge congestion. Our social etiquettes needs to be questioned, and when the roads get blocked, right? Obviously, there is hatred building up against the Muslim community. So all this put together translate to the extreme racism we are facing in this country today.
Go ahead, Brother Salah. Go ahead.
Actually, salam alaikum. So, as somebody in the US right now, and I thank you for taking the time to talking to us, I personally wanted to really learn more and more about this. I feel like unaware and ill-informed of what's going on in Sri Lanka. So I'm really grateful for this. Besides me knowing about this, what do you expect from me as a person living in the United States, as a person who feels your pain, worries about what is to come, if this is going to be institutionalized, because this is an extinguishing racism. Racism takes different forms. Some are institutional, some are cultural, some are in the workplace, and then it touches upon your religious freedoms. So it's multifaceted. It's a whole picture. And what's so worrisome to me is that if you allow part of it to prevail, then before you know it, it's tackling all aspects of your life, and before you know it, you'll be applying for a visa to come to the US or a Western country, which is the last thing somebody like you wants. And you express that already from the beginning that this is the place where you want to live, you want to die, you want your kids to live, and you love that place. It is your place. No one should even question that. So, what do you expect from me, from anybody who's listening to you in the West, United States or otherwise? Go ahead.
The first thing I would say is ask the 2 billion Muslims around the world to make dua for us.
I mean,
Uh, yeah, and that is our primary requirement. Then, of course, every person possible across the world should engage in diplomatic initiatives to prevail upon our government to make sure that our basic human rights are protected and ensured. That is something which which every single uh, Muslim across the world could ask their congressmen or ask their governments to intervene, because you see, if 194 countries are allowing, so every single person in those 194 countries is entitled to engage, whether they are Muslims or not. They are entitled to engage their local representatives, their federal representatives, their government representatives to use diplomatic channels, right? I insist, diplomatic channels, right, to engage the Sri Lankan government to provide us. It's not a concession; it's a basic right of ours, We are not asking for anything which is unreasonable. We have told the government very, very clearly that if you can uh, uh, prove beyond the myth, prove through sciences that the burying of the dead, right, is going to be harmful to those living, right? We have no hesitation in accepting it. Islam will provide for that. Islam provides for that, and we are supposed to adhere to the security of our neighbors, our friends, our countrymen, and everybody else living around us. So we have, I would say, prove us, give us your scientific explanation, and we will accept it. And there is no scientific explanation to this, right? Because the world leaders in medicine and sciences have clearly said that burying is an option that is completely acceptable. And in a country like Sri Lanka, Allah forbid, we may not need mass graves. But in the United States, in Spain, in Italy, everywhere, they just dumped bodies in mass graves. So what we have asked the government is that we don't we there are four requirements for a janaza, right? We are willing to give up the first three. That is, washing the body, shrouding them in white cloth, right? Then prayer at the masjid, right? And then burial. We have said first three we will this thing, right? You bring the body, right, using your own officials or medical team, right, up to our burial ground, right? And then we will say a prayer from about 50 meters away from the body, our janaza prayers, and after that they can bury. We don't have to be involved in the burying. No Muslim needs to be involved in the burying, right? So we have given all these concessions, but we have not got that. But I must also say uh, I was interviewed by BBC on this sometime in March, April or May, and the BBC radio reporter reached out to the government for a comment, and the government, the person who is heading the technical committee of the government, went on record saying that if Muslims were given the bodies for burial, they might use it to manufacture biological weapons. Right? They might use the coronavirus as a biological weapon. Right? He fails to understand that we have set up uh, 50, 60 quarantine centers around the world, and there are many, around the country, and there are many who have been identified as corona infected in all these quarantine centers. All that water, all that water is going direct into the ground, right? The wastewater, which is this thing, uh, even the toilets don't have special septic tanks. It's going directly into the ground, right? Because these are all makeshift quarantine centers. So there is absolutely no justification for them to say burying a person 6 feet under, we have even offered to bury them at 10 feet, right? Will cause any harm to any groundwater sources, right? So it's as simple as that.
I see. So here is what we could do here in the West. We can definitely reach out to our representatives in Congress, in the Senate, with this issue. And I don't mind personally to cooperate with you in coordinating such things. We've done it for other places, and we'd love to at least stand by our brothers. After all, I mean, as our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, that we're one body. The Muslim Ummah is one body. If one part of the body is hurting, then the rest of the body must react, then naturally react with uh, fever and lack of sleep. And what happens with lack of sleep is when you have the empathy towards your brothers and sisters, and the mere fact that we're having this interview, this gathering, may Allah bless it, is to show our empathy to our brothers and sisters. For me, it's more than just burying bodies or burning bodies. For me, it's what is going to come in 30 years from now. If this is normalized, if this becomes acceptable, then maybe we shouldn't hire people in the military who are of Muslim origin. Maybe we shouldn't let them run for office. Maybe we shouldn't. And it starts accumulating. It starts usually with small. So if a whole country doesn't feel the urgency to maintain social order by establishing justice and nothing else but justice and equity that could bring uh, any form of social order to any country on planet Earth, and any missing with justice to any group of people will definitely end up bringing you, like you had in your own beautiful country, the Tamil wars with the North, etc. So the moment you do that, it becomes a threat to the whole existence of the country. And if the country is not smart enough to realize that this is our fabric, and now we're tearing our own dress, our own fabric, then maybe other people from the outside must come to the rescue. Again, I'm not concerned about the burning. It hurts me. It bothers me. It got me to really want to participate here. I'm just worried down the road if we do not organize for a collective positive response, then what are the outcomes? Do we need to wait for another 50 years to become the new Rohingyas? And maybe it won't take the 50 years because we've seen that it felt like it was overnight. Do we need to repeat the story of the Champas in Cambodia and Vietnam? Uh, it all started with a small thing like this, and it exaggerated, elaborate. So my promise to you is here, we will write to this. I would like to get your contact, inshallah, with the rest with the Nilam, and possibly draft something that we could circulate among our social justice organizations of this area, and then publicize it to the rest of the United States. So other communities, Muslim communities, could really start mobilizing our local people here. And that's my promise to you for the time and this tonight, inshallah.
Very
Nilam?
good. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Thank you very much for your time and your thoughts. You
Nilam, I
truly
would like to respond to that briefly.
go ahead. Go ahead.
Uh, yeah, Brother Salah, I have a very specific request that please use whatever diplomatic channels. I mean diplomatic channels to drive home the fact that the Sri Lankan government should listen to WHO, listen to the world opinion, and because we fear that if this does not this is not allowed today, we might end up in a situation where the Muslims will be forcibly cremated even under natural deaths. And also, you see now, our president requested the Maldivian government to send our corona-infected dead bodies for burial in Maldives. See, we are Sri Lankans. We are born here, right? We live here, right? And we want to die here. We want to be buried here. So it is very, very important that we don't accept any of this. Later on, they might say, okay, if you can bury your dead in Maldives, why don't you all move to Maldives? Right? You don't belong here. So it is very, very important. And I also feel there's a lot of pressure on Muslim leaders to engage the Middle East countries to enforce sanctions against Sri Lanka. You see, we get oil at concessions from Iran. Then there are about 1 million Sri Lankans employed as expatriate labor, right, in the Middle East. Right? If one country imposes sanctions, the Sri Lankan economy is destroyed. It's completely gone. It will be worse than Zimbabwe or any other country like that. So we don't want that to happen, right? This is our country. We belong here. We need to prosper here. And as a nation, every Sri Lankan citizen, right, should live in peace and dignity. So, whatever undertaking the world community or the Muslim community around the world, it should not be at the cost of our economy, because not everybody is a racist. I would say 90% of the singular Buddhist population are not racist. So, I mean, we cannot inflict anything on that 90% just because 10% are being racist.
Allah bless you. Yes, Brother Milan.
Yeah, thank you very much, Brother Hilmy, for your time, and we truly appreciate it. And whatever we discussed here, and particularly about the action items, right? Inshallah, we'll do from here. Brothers and sisters, those who are watching, as he mentioned, there are a couple of things that we can do. Number one, please make dua. Please include our brothers and sisters in Sri Lanka. And also, please, if you live here in the United States or Canada, please reach out to your congressman and encourage them to raise this concern and awareness, and also ask them to tweet it. All right, with that, and any last remark before we wrap up, Brother Hilmi?
No, Alhamdulillah, thank you for this opportunity. And my humble request is that to pray kunut after every prayers, right? Make dua for Muslims, and at every opportunity, engage the non-Muslim or the Muslims of other faiths in your countries. Explain to them the need for all of us in Sri Lanka to live in peace and harmony. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you again for watching the live program at BayMuslim Media. You can subscribe to our channel so that you can get notified for our upcoming programs. With that, we are going to wrap up. Brother Salah, you want to just make conclusion? Dua?
May Allah bless you. Jazakum Allah khair. Just for the ad, do you have the link for that, or does anybody have the link for this Muslim Network TV? Whoever wants to watch it later on.
Yeah, we will. Yeah, we can provide that. We can provide that. Yeah, we'll do that.
I pray for all of us, Ya Allah, Ya Kareem, Ya Arhamar Rahimin, to uplift our ummah in all corners of the planet. Ya Allah, forgive us our sins, forgive us for all of our transgressions. And I end by our dua, وَالْعَصْرِ إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَفِي خُسْرٍ إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ. Allahumma ij'alna, Allah make us from the people who have stand firm with sabr, وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاصَوْا, and stand firmly with right and justice. That's what the last two words of this verse that I recited say. To stand, we all stand with each other, because it's a plural form, the verb, for justice and for patience, and make each ourselves patient as well. Ameen, Ameen. Jazakum Allah khair for this time. May Allah bless us all.